Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Na čelu malezijske vlade od 1981. bio je ukupno 24 godine. Ovaj svjetski državnik razvio industriju, turizam, privredu i obrazovanje, a tokom velike azijske finansijske krize krajem 90. godina serijom nekonvencionalnih mjera spasio je ekonomiju Malezije. Još politički aktivan u 98. godini života, Mahatir Mohamed za Al Jazeeru govori o svom dugogodišnjem domaćem i međunarodnom političkom iskustvu, aktualnim geopolitičkim trendovima, pogrešnim temeljima svjetskog poretka, povratku u politiku i sudbini multipolarnog svijeta.
Dr. Mahatir, welcome to the program of Al Jazeera Balkans.
Thank you.
Back in the 90s, at the time of speculations and certain problems with the Malaysian currency ringgit, you opted out for some measures that are unorthodox until today. How did you manage to keep the stability of the currency and stabilize and save the Malaysian economy?
Well, instead of allowing the market to determine the value of our currency against the US dollar, we decided to fix the rate. We fixed it at 3.8 to 1 US dollar. But the important thing is that you must have good reserves. We had good reserves, very big reserves of US currency. So anybody wanting to buy anything from outside the country, which is priced in ringgit, in US dollar, they can obtain the US dollar from the banking system and they can purchase. But when they earn US dollar for selling something abroad or export, that US dollar must be deposited with the bank and they take the local currency for local domestic use.
Okay. Speaking of economy just now, your background in education is not economy nor is it politics.
No.
How did you become a statesman and an economic visionary with a completely different background in medicine, if I'm right?
Well, when I don't know something, I ask people who do know. For example, I had no knowledge about finance, and yet during the currency crisis, I had to manage the finance of the country. So I call up experts, ask them about the banking system, about the financial system, and from there I learned quite sufficiently to be able to manage.
You witnessed British colonial rule in Malaysia. You were also an anti-colonial fighter in Malaysia. You participated basically in all political processes in Free Malaysia from 1957 until just today as well, 2023. Is there some event or something that you would take out in all those years?
Well, after serving the country for 22 years, I decided that that's too long. I should step down, and I did. But when I stepped down, I expected people who took over from me, new prime ministers, should follow the system which has enabled Malaysia to develop and grow. Unfortunately, they tend to other policies, and the country suffered. So I regret that I stepped down. Maybe I was still fit, I could still work. I was in my late 70s at that time. But now I know that had I not stepped down, I might be able to achieve Vision 2020 to become a developed country.
Can you tell me about Vision 2020? It's, as far as I know, it's your goal to have Malaysia become a fully developed country by 2020. What happened to this?
Well, we had policies and strategies that enable the country to grow. We were growing at about 7% a year. At that rate, we would, by 30 years, we would have become a developed country. Because this Vision 2020 was introduced in the 1980s, early 1980. So we were going to develop the country until the year 2020. And we thought that 30 years would be sufficient for us to develop. But after I stepped down in 2003, the government changed direction. And that's why we did not achieve our target.
Why did you come back to politics in 2018?
Well, after I stepped down, a lot of people were not happy with the government. They came to see me and asked me to do something to, well, to restore the country. At first I thought I might advise the government on the direction, but the government, the Prime Minister, the two Prime Ministers who succeeded me, did not want to follow my advice. They had their own ideas, and it was their ideas which caused the country to stop developing at the old rate. So that is what happened, because then a lot of people came to see me to ask me, please do something. Advising doesn't work. Eventually, we had to form a party to contest against the government, my own party. I had to leave the party, set up a new party to contest against the government. And in 2018, we contested in the elections and we won.
Where is Malaysia today? I mean, especially because comparing today's Malaysia to the one you took over from, the post-colonial one, and on the path which you created this country that became a thriving economy, one of the tigers, etc., etc. Where is it today?
Well, it's not the tiger, certainly. Unfortunately, the previous prime ministers who succeeded me, they borrowed a lot of money. They borrowed 42 billion ringgit, and some of the money disappeared. Meaning to say that the prime minister had actually stolen the money. And of course, today he's in jail because of that. So the country, instead of being called the Asian tiger, it is known as the kleptocracy, a country governed by thieves.
And what's the future? Is there any way to remedy those things? Or remedy also the image? What happened to the image of Malaysia globally with all these scandals?
Well, the image was certainly not good, because Malaysia was seen as a country that is governed by corrupt people, people who stole government money. But during elections, in 2018, in the 14th election, we managed to overthrow the government. But then they did some fiddling. They bought over support the government party which lost. They attracted some of the members of the winning party, which have formed the government, and that government fell. And the losers now form the government. And even when we have an election in the 15th election, still the losers were able to form a coalition government. They did not win, but the two parties which belonged to the old government, corrupt government, were able to work together and form the government today. So this government is not the government elected by the people. They are both rejected by the people, but by coming together, forming a coalition, they had enough majority to form the new government.
Since we're in Sarajevo, you came for, as you told me before the interview, your 5th visit to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Let's go back to the 90s. From the start of the aggression on Bosnia and Herzegovina, Malaysia was fully supporting everything regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 1994, in Kuala Lumpur, you held the International Parliamentarians Against Genocide in Bosnia. A lot of money was brought to Bosnia during and after the war. Some of the first, I think, Peace Corps were Malaysian troops as well. What are the motives behind all this great support and friendship for Bosnia?
Well, we are against oppression anywhere, but it so happens that Bosnia is a Muslim country, and we are Muslim. We feel concerned because Muslim countries are very weak. They are not able to help other Muslim countries when they are in trouble. But we had developed to a certain extent, and since we had the capacity, we sent troops here to help establish peace, and at the same time, we feel that the war should be stopped. So in some ways, we helped the Bosnians to fight against the Serbs, and because they were able to go against the Serbs very strongly, the Western nation decided that the war should stop, and they set up the Dayton Agreement, which made ended the war and formed the state of Bosnia as well as Srpska.
Tell me, how would you rate Bosnian-Malaysian relations today?
Well, we wish that it would be stronger, but we are also facing problems at home. There's not much time and much capacity to be involved with other countries. But as a trading nation, we are always looking for markets, for sourcing supplies, and for selling our goods.
You have always been one of the leading advocates for a multipolar world. We are seeing some changes recently in the last few years, most notably the war in Ukraine, the position of China, but also in the last few months we're seeing Saudi Arabia mending relations with Iran. We're seeing African Union sending a peace delegation to Europe, to Ukraine. Are we witnessing a change? Are we witnessing finally that multipolar world, or is it more of a multipolar chaos?
Yeah, it's chaotic. The world is in a state of turmoil. What happens is that the U.S. is keen to promote war. So if there are two pairs of country, a pair of countries fighting each other or having a conflict with each other, the U.S. would like the conflict to continue, and they would support one party against the other. For example, they used to support Saudi Arabia against Iran. They supplied money, arms, and all that to Saudi Arabia to continue to fight against Iran, because Iran happens to be an enemy of the U.S. Also in the Far East, we find that Taiwan, which is a part of China, claimed by China as part of China, the U.S. wants to show that Taiwan is not a part of China. So it is opposed to that concept. And as usual, the U.S. would help Taiwan to oppose China, not go into war, but to oppose China. And the visit of the Speaker of the Congress to Taiwan has increased the tension. So now Taiwan is arming. In the West, you see the Ukraine at war with Russia, And this is good for the arms business. You can sell a lot of arms to people who are fighting wars. People who are at peace will not buy weapons. So the US is for wars to be fought, and they will help and also supply arms. Whereas in the case of China, which is supposed to be a very warlike nation, instead China went to Iran and then visited Saudi and told Iran and Saudi that they should stop their confrontation and they should establish good relations. So China is for peace, US is for war.
Is this how you see China then?
Well, China is a powerful nation. It is a big nation. Population-wise, it is bigger than Europe and North America combined. It's very big. And people are very industrious, very clever, and they have been able to develop their country to the extent that they are at par with the West. For example, they can establish space station on their own. They can send astronauts and all that into space. And in industry, there is nothing that they cannot do. They sell, in 1 year, they sell 35 million cars, whereas the US can only manage 10 to 12 million cars. So China is a big country, and we have to accept that it is a powerful country.
Speaking again about multipolarity of the world, you recently spoke about the world government, and I know you have your criticism of the United Nations as well, especially of the permanent members and actually those who are creating the politics that we live in. What is wrong with the UN, and what is this supposed world government you talked about?
Well, the UN was set up by the victors in the last war, and they gave themselves the privilege of veto power. 5 countries had veto power. Once you give 5 countries veto power in any organization, then it is no longer democratic. So the UN has 190 countries, membership of 190 countries. But any one of the veto powers can stop 190 countries from doing anything. So it's most undemocratic. And yet some members of these veto powers are trying to democratize all the countries in the world. And yet they advocate no democracy in the UN. That is why I felt that either you get rid of the veto powers and allow the UN to be more democratic, or you set up a different institution that will deal with common problems. Now the world faces common problems, but are acting as if they are separate countries. For example, the pandemic. Each country deals with the pandemic according to its capacity. The rich can tackle, the poor cannot. But this is a common problem. It must be tackled as a problem of the whole world. And you need to set up an authority that has power to direct things throughout the world, not only in one country. That is why I suggested that maybe we should have a world government, but confined to certain common issues only. Other things, domestic issues, will be dealt by the countries by themselves. But for common issues like climate change, like pandemic, like the trade and the economy, these are common problems which we should tackle together.
Dr. Mahatir, thank you for your time and thank you for trusting Al Jazeera.
You're welcome.